on Instagram as well, since we're here. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. You have to put a comment for me to see your name, but thank you guys for joining. Who do we have tuning in today? Let me know your name, where you're from. Today we're going to be talking about forgiveness and boundaries. And I'm excited. I'm very calm. I just came from the park from doing some yoga and just meditating out in the sun. It was just so beautiful and so relaxing. And now we're going to have this conversation. I'm just waiting for people to join. Hey! So yeah, we're going to have this conversation about forgiveness and boundaries. I'm streaming on both Instagram and YouTube. So if I'm looking in different directions, that's why. But I'm excited to have this conversation. This live stream might be shorter. I feel like I always think that they're going to be short and then they end up being forever. But this one really might be a shorter conversation. But we'll see how it goes. Hi, Tressa. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube. Always supporting. I appreciate it. So we're going to be talking about boundaries and forgiveness. So before I start with like my little bit of notes, like I don't have a lot of notes today. That's why I said I think it's going to be short because my notes are like it's not extensive. Yesterday I had like a full page and a half of notes. But yeah, before I get into my notes, I would love to know, like, from you guys watching, just what are your, first of all, because I'm sharing my perspective of forgiveness and boundaries. Well, not solely. I was going to say in regards to a breakup, which is a portion of it, but I am also going to talk about other relationships as well, because life includes more than just your romantic relationships. So I'm going to touch on all areas of relationships, but I'm curious to know if anyone is currently in that phase of feeling like they need to either forgive somebody or they need to set boundaries with somebody, whether it's romantic or it's a non-romantic relationship, like a family or a friend, or I would just love to hear where you guys are currently when it comes to that. And then we'll get into it. Check. While you guys are leaving your comments, I'm going to just check the stream. Make sure it looks okay. All right. I finally figured out how to stream on YouTube. I'm so proud of myself. From my computer, at least. I would struggle all the time trying to figure this out. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get into it. First and foremost, I realized I didn't do this yesterday, but I need to start doing it because not everyone watching live stream knows who I am. So I'm Fatima, founder of the soulbeautychat community. I have a podcast and a Facebook community where we talk about all things self-care from a Christian perspective. And every once in a while, I hop on here and I host these live conversations about different topics related to mental health, faith, self-love, self-care, all of the above. And I also have, like I mentioned, a Facebook community where we do challenges, where we offer support. And I also offer different services and products outside of what you see here on YouTube, what you see here on Instagram, and like the podcast. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can just check out my website, soulbeautychat.com, and you can find out about all the ways that we can work together, all the events I have coming up. I actually have a workshop happening on Saturday, which is May 23rd, I believe, at 6 p.m. PST. So it's kind of late for the people watching on the East Coast. I'm sorry. But it's going to be in collaboration with Kat Parks, who is the founder of Girl Power LA. And that's why we're doing it 6 p.m. PST this time. Usually I make it so that it's more comfortable for people on the East Coast because I know that's where majority of my viewers are. But this time I figured since I'm collaborating with Kat and most of her community is here, I wanted to really make sure that it was more accommodating for people who are on the West Coast. So that's happening on Saturday, 6 p.m. PST. There's only 2 seats left. If you're interested, this is the chance to sign up. And that information is available on my website, but also you can just click the link in my bio on Instagram if you don't feel like digging for it on my website. If you're watching on YouTube, though, I'll post a link in the chat. But if you're on Instagram, just click the link in my bio and you can sign up for the workshop that I'm going to be doing with Kat on Saturday about setting healthy relationship goals. So I'm very excited about that conversation. I think it's going to be a really good one. And it's a part of the self-love dating series, which is this conversation is also a part of it about setting boundaries and forgiveness. So we're going to get into it. Let me just drop this link in the chat. Hi, Chantel. Hi, Liz. Thank you guys for tuning in. So yeah, like I mentioned, there's only 2 seats left for the conversation that's happening on Saturday. So if you're interested, it's your last chance to sign up. Hello. Thank you guys for tuning in. Okay. So at the beginning of this, I posed the question of where are you when it comes to forgiveness and boundaries? Like, is there someone currently in your life that you need to set boundaries with or that you feel like you need to forgive? So you can just drop those in the comments as you're joining. I just dropped Locks on YouTube. I just dropped the link in the chat. So all you have to do is click that link and it'll take you to my website. Hi, Angelic Impressions. Hey, girl. Okay. So yeah, so let me know in the comment section if you're welcome. Let me know in the comment section if you have thoughts about forgiveness or setting boundaries. Do you have someone you need to forgive? Do you need to set boundaries with someone? And I'm going to go ahead and get into kind of like why I wanted to have this conversation. And then I'll read some of your comments. So I wanted to have this conversation because if you guys follow my YouTube channel, you know, because I've been sharing that I am healing from a breakup and I've been documenting that journey because honestly, my channel is all about transparency and vulnerability and shared experiences and how one person's experience can lead to another person's healing. So when all of this was happening, I decided to just document it, for myself to look back on and see my progress and see what I did, but also for other people who might be in a similar space. So I'm glad you said coworkers. Let me write that down because I have interesting example I want to share, or maybe I won't share. I don't know who's watching, but I do want to touch on that. So I have just been sharing my journey, and I wanted to have a conversation about this because I think a lot of times boundaries are automatically viewed as something negative, right? Like they're viewed as like this wall that you're putting up or this barrier that we're putting up, and it just, at least for me, it has a lot of negative connotation attached to it, right? And that's something that I'm working through and have been working through in therapy to really shift my perspective on boundaries, the purpose of boundaries, and just my view and perspective of them. So it is not. So yeah, it's not a negative thing. Boundaries are not a negative thing. I'll just start there. I think it can come across as negative because in order to create a boundary, like you are basically doing something to protect yourself. And that means that someone else is going to be disappointed. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and we were talking about this and they said, I think it was a quote that they heard somewhere, but something along the lines of like, in someone's eyes, you're always going to be a villain. And especially when it comes to like setting boundaries. And I was just like, that's so true. Like if you're choosing to protect yourself in a moment, someone might view you as the villain in that situation. Someone might be upset by that. So I wanted to just have an open dialogue conversation about that. And then I also wanted to talk about forgiveness because in the perspective of relationships, romantic relationships, any relationships, a lot of times forgiveness and boundaries go hand in hand. So like Sometimes you may be in a spot where you need to forgive someone. And while I'm discussing both of them together, hi Bryson, that's why I'm discussing both of them together. So yeah, it's going to be a good conversation. Feel free to drop your comments and questions as I'm talking. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read some of the comments that you guys put in, and then we're going to talk specifically about uh, forgiveness and then boundaries in regards to relationship, family, friends, and coworkers. So let's see what we got on Instagram. Uh, Liz says, I'm working on forgiveness and boundaries. This has been a theme in my season. Same. She says, I have someone I need to forgive and I'm setting boundaries with a coworker. I love your transparency. Oh, thank you. Setting boundaries with toxic family members. That is very real. They are healthy and healing. Yes, 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 yes. Lots on YouTube says, yes, I do need to set boundaries with one of my friends I've known for many years. However, it's a one-sided friendship. And it's been bugging me for a while now. And all she talks about is things going on with herself, and it's been draining. Oh my God, I have been there. I have been there more than once, more than once. So we're going to get into that when we get to the friends portion of the conversation. So first I'm going to start with forgiveness, right? In the lens of a romantic relationship or just I think you can apply this to any relationship, but my perspective right now is coming from a romantic relationship. Something that I was really struggling with in my process of healing was, okay, once I got to a really healthy point, I was like, okay, so does that mean now that I need to express verbally to this person that I'm in a healthy point, right? Like maybe someone does something to you, a friend, a family member, a coworker, they do something, you're upset, you're not talking for a while, and then you get to a point where you feel better, you feel like you've moved on from it, you've done whatever you needed to do to heal from it. And then I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but then I had this moment where I was like, so do I need to let them know now that I forgive them? Do I need to let them know that like I'm not angry? Do I need to let them know that like we're okay? And I was having this conversation with a few people. One person that I talked to about it, of course, my therapist, shout out to her. So I'm talking to my therapist and she asked me, well, why do you feel like you need to share this information with that person? And hi, Jasmine, and Jasmine, two Jasmines. Why do you feel like you need to share that information with this person? And I was just like, well, I guess because I don't want them to feel like I was having so much anxiety about what if this person still thinks that I'm upset with them, right? They think that I'm upset with them, and then that could potentially mean we'll never talk again because they think that I'm upset. Or it could just be one of those situations where you look back years from now and you're like, I don't even remember why I stopped talking to that person. Like I had a really close friend when I was in college. Like we were really tight and then we became roommates and then everything went downhill. Everything went downhill. And like years had passed and we still were not talking to each other. And it sucked because it was like, that was somebody that I was really, really close to. So it was like, we went from being really tight to hating each other to not talking at all. And then years passed and it's like, no one reached out, no one said anything, but I felt better about the situation. I don't know how she felt about the situation, but we had a very rare occasion where we actually ran into each other and it was just like this awkward tension. It's like she looking at me, I'm looking at her. We both like, well, is the other person going to speak? And it's just like, it's one of those situations that it just fizzled out and no one ever reached out to reconciliate. And I think in some situations, telling the person that you forgive them is helpful if you want to continue having a relationship with the person. Even if that means the relationship has shifted or has changed, it is helpful in some instances if you want to continue the friendship. I think another question that my therapist asked me that was really profound and kind of just gave me a second to just pause was she asked me, are you prepared for however that person reacts, right? So like, let's say, for example, you're in a situation where you feel like you want to share with someone that you forgive them, but maybe they're upset with you now, or maybe they haven't forgiven you for whatever wrong you've caused in the situation. And now you're extending that olive branch saying, hey, I just wanted to reach out to let you know X, Y, and Z, and maybe they don't respond. Or maybe they give you shade, maybe they give you attitude. And it's like, you have to be ready for whatever their response is. Like, you have to be prepared for that mentally, emotionally. Like, what if they want to have a conversation? What if they don't want to deal with you at all? You have thought about what those potential outcomes would be, and then you have to have said, okay, I'm at peace with that. I'm at peace with whatever they decide they want to do after I share this. So when I had that conversation with my therapist and she broke it down in that way, and I was just kind of like, to be honest, I'm not really ready for this person's response. I don't really like, I'm not interested in their response right now. It was more so like a personal thing for me. Like, I felt like I needed to share that I've forgiven this person. And then once she asked me that question, like, is it worth your peace, essentially? Is it worth your peace if you reach out and this person wants nothing to do with you, or this person reacts really negatively? Is that worth the peace that you have about it now? And the answer is no. So in some cases, forgiveness looks like moving on silently. Some cases, forgiveness looks like, reaching out to the person and rebuilding the relationship, the friendship. But in some cases, it really just means having inner peace and continuing moving forward with your life. And I think that's okay. It's okay for forgiveness to look different for person to person, but also from relationship to relationship. So maybe in relationships, in your romantic relationship, it could look one way, but then in a future relationship, it could look different. Or with a parent or with a friend, it could look completely different. So those are my thoughts on forgiveness, and that's why I wanted to kind of start this conversation. Let me just read some of the comments that came in. What do you do if you want to start a relationship with yourself first before getting into your first relationship with the opposite sex? Oh, so actually, Bryson, that's a great question. So this series is actually touching on a lot of that. That actually gives me an idea of maybe I should just make like a video with like point topics. Let me just write that down real fast, because I don't think I've made a video about that in very like in one video yet. Start a relationship with yourself. But I guess some tips that I would share is some tips that I would share about that would probably be like just doing an audit of like where you are currently. So I'm really big on like auditing myself, auditing my goals, auditing my intentions. And basically all that means is like taking a look at every area of your life and seeing like where you are currently and what do you want to change. Similar to what we talked about yesterday, of like what are the things you can change, what are the things you can't change. So, but I would encourage you to do that for every area of your life. So maybe start with your career, then start with your friendships, then start with romantic relationships, then start with your faith or spirituality. Really just break it up into categories and then just write out like, this is how things currently are. So let's use the example of your career, because I feel like that's the easiest one. So let's say you are currently working at a job you don't like. Let's say you currently have a long commute. Let's say you currently, well, maybe not now, but maybe you have a long commute. Maybe you don't get paid the amount of money you want, right? So those are 3 things that are not aligned with what you want. And then you can write what are some things that are actually aligned with what you want. So maybe you want a job where you could work remote. Maybe you want a job where you are paid $100K a year. Maybe you want a job where you don't have to. Well, yeah, let's just use those 2 examples. You want to work remote and you want $100K a year. So those are like, that's how you start with the auditing, right? That's how you start with auditing a different area of your life. Do that with all the different areas of your life and then see where you are. And I think that's a good way to kind of dip your foot in. And then comes the emotional side, right? Because you can't just do the practical stuff. You have to also look at the emotional side and think, okay, so if I want to change my job circumstances, what needs to change within me on an emotional, mental, maybe even spiritual level in order for me to do those things? In order for me to accomplish those things, what would I have to change about myself? So that's one tip that I would suggest. Another tip that I would suggest is journaling. I talked about that yesterday as well, but if that's not something you already do, I think that's a good place to start because it helps you to just like process a lot of your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. And I think one of the best ways to build a relationship with yourself is to get comfortable being open and vulnerable and transparent with yourself. So if you're kind of carrying around, oh, sorry guys, I accidentally switched the camera. So if you're carrying around feelings and emotions and issues and anger or different things bottled up and you're not exploring it, then it's kind of hard to actually start to have a relationship with yourself because you don't know yourself. So those are some things that I would suggest. Oh, wow, I just described your job. That's crazy. Let me read some of the comments. What do you do? Okay, I read that already. I know this is about boundaries, but if you don't have what you want to do in your career, oh, okay. I just never thought about what I wanted to do in life about 2 years ago. I never thought about my purpose in life. I was just floating around. Yeah, I would encourage those two things, Bryce, and I think that those will probably help you to get some clarity on like what you actually want. But sometimes it's hard to figure out what we want if we've never had it. But start with what you don't want. Look at your current situation and say, these are the things that are not working for me. These are things that I do not want and that I want to change. And then from there, you can start to figure out what you do want. So I hope that was helpful. And also, I have a lot of videos about purpose and your calling and all of that. So I would suggest checking out the videos on my channel because I talk about that a lot, actually. Okay, so let's go on to family. A few people mentioned, for people who are just joining, we're talking about boundaries and forgiveness. And right now we're about to discuss boundaries with family members. So if you can leave a comment letting me know, do you feel like you need to set boundaries with anyone in your life right now? Or do you need to forgive anyone in your life right now? So family. This is a tricky one for a lot of people, including me. Also, I don't know if I mentioned, but I just got finished working out, which is why I'm like barely dressed today. So I literally just walked in the house from the park. Liz says, I have a friend that I cut off last year due to crossing boundaries in a romantic way. I cut him off because I was led to believe he wanted something more, but that wasn't the case. So just to make sure I understand what you're saying that you thought that it was forming in a romantic way, but it turned into him not being interested in that. And then you said, peace and I want peace and more peace, and that's why I cut him off. Okay, so we're going to talk about families first, and then we're going to get into friends and coworkers. So, boundaries with family. I'm finding that right now in this current climate that we're in, where a lot of people are home, a lot of people have lost their jobs, a lot of people just might have more time on their hands. People are finding different ways to navigate this new space that we're in, right? And for some people, I don't know if you guys can relate, but for some people, that means calling people a lot and talking a lot about what's happening. Like, so that's how some people cope with feeling afraid or feeling panicked or feeling worried. It's like they want to talk about it constantly. And that's something that for me currently that I've been experiencing when it comes to family, with some family members, where it's just like I can tell that they're just trying to navigate what's happening, but that's causing a lot of just wanting to talk about all the chaos that's happening in the world. Now, me being the person that I am, I talk about this on my YouTube channel quite a bit, that something called a highly sensitive person or empath, but it simply just means that you are someone that is extremely sensitive to outside things, stimulation, noise, light, sound, other people's emotions. Like, that's a very real thing. I didn't think it was a real thing until I stumbled across it, and then I got a book and I read the book and I was like, wow, this is my life. This is actually my life. Also, side note, my battery is dying on Instagram. So if my phone cuts off, just join us over on YouTube. But yeah, I just was once I realized that, I was like, okay, something has to change, right? And that for me means that I have to be very clear on setting boundaries with people. And that's something that I've struggled with for a very long time. I would say just getting to this year, 2020, is where I'm finally getting to a point where I'm just getting more clear with people and I'm getting more direct with people and very just like kind of short to a certain extent, but trying to do it in a respectful way. Because when you think about boundaries in the sense of self preservation rather than something mean or something that's going to make someone uncomfortable, when you just think of this as I have to take care of myself mentally, emotionally, and physically, right? I am the person that's responsible for taking care of myself. So that means if I am in a situation where someone is doing something that is negatively impacting me on a mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual level, I have to protect myself. And a lot of times that protection can simply come from disengaging, right? Sometimes that disengaging means you have to take a step back, right? Sometimes that disengaging means you have to ignore. Sometimes that disengaging means you have to be clear with someone and say, hey, this works for me, this does not work for me. So I'm going to give you guys an example. So I have a family member who, like I said, enjoys just talking about what's going on. And something that I've done as a boundary, first, I was just like, oh, this makes me a little uncomfortable because for me, I'm the opposite. I don't want to talk about what's going on. I don't want to talk about the pandemic. I don't want to talk about it. I stay aware, I stay up to date with what's happening, but I don't want to discuss it. So if you're calling me and that's your intention, I have to, one, choose to disengage, to take a step back and to not involve myself in it. Or two, I have to be very intentional about shifting the conversation when it comes up. Or three, or a combination of all three, actually, I have to tell you, hey, this is not something that I want to talk about. Now, done that. I've done all three of those things that I just mentioned. And something that's really important to know about boundaries is that sometimes people are still not going to respect them. Sometimes you can tell a person, you can disengage, you can change the subject, but sometimes people are just going to do what they want to do. And they may not even realize, even though you've told them, they may not realize the distress that they're putting you in by continuously overstepping your boundary. So, again, back to self preservation, we are responsible to take care of ourselves. So, if you feel like someone is continuously crossing your boundary, it's up to you to navigate how you're going to move forward. So, like I said, maybe that means just completely disengaging. Maybe that means taking a step back altogether, right? And that brings me to the topic of friends, right? Because I have examples with friends as well. And I think somebody else mentioned that too, that they struggle with that with friends where they would just talk about themselves all the time, all the time. I had a friend like that once where this person would call me and they would just like, they'd be like, oh, hey, what you doing? I'd be like, oh, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And then before I know it, they would just start complaining. They would just be complaining about the same situation, not at that, like something that we talked about often. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm having a rough day. It's like, oh no, like this is the same situation that we talked about last week that I want to vent to you about again. Um, but instead of one asking you if this is a time where I can vent to you, or instead of, actually taking the advice that you gave me during the last conversation, instead, I'm just going to hop on the phone, ask one quick question about how you're doing without any real interest. And then I'm going to move on to start complaining about the thing that I always complain to you about. Now, the reason why some people do that is because we allow it, right? Like if you are always that friend that's choosing to let people vent to you, right? And if you are someone that's similar to how I describe as a highly sensitive person or someone that's an empath, unfortunately, we draw those type of people towards us. Like, because people can see that we're kind, we're caring, we're loving, we're compassionate, we want to listen, we want to offer advice. They can sense that. So when people can sense that, like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys, but there's been times where I'll be out maybe at the grocery store or at the park or whatever, and I'll meet somebody and they'll just start telling me their whole life story. their whole life story. And I'm like, this person does not know me from a can of paint. Baby girl, why are you telling me all your business? It happens at new jobs. It happens like when I was in school, it would happen. And I'm just like, why does this happen all the time? And through studying like what it means to be someone that's like very sensitive to everything around them, I started to understand like that's what that is. Like people can pick up on that, they gravitate towards you. Sometimes they latch onto you. Like there's literally something called an energy vampire, and they are real. And that toxic friend that you mentioned, Locks on YouTube, that is like a prime example of a toxic um, energy vampire. Like they just want to suck the life out of you because it makes them feel better. It makes them feel, they don't actually want advice a lot of times. They don't actually want support. Sometimes they literally just want to, one, dump onto somebody else, right? Like they want to dump what they're feeling onto somebody else. But a lot of times they don't want advice. So giving them advice actually doesn't do anything. Like it's like it goes in one ear and right out the other. They're like, oh, okay, and then the next day they call me back with the same issue. um, but what about if she knows you're not okay and she asks you how you're doing? You say you're right, but your face doesn't say that. And then she continues to talk about her life more so her relationship. If I mentioned about self-love or self-growth within myself, she just ignores it and continues to talk about herself. So what I would suggest in that situation, what I actually did, because it's same what you just described is the same thing. What I actually did was one day, this person called me and I was just like, look, um, do not call me if you want to talk about this because I've given you advice. I've told you what I think, and you're still in the same situation continuously. And it doesn't seem like to me you actually want to change it. So, hey, Nessa, my sister just joined. But yeah, that's what I would do. I would just be very clear with the person, like, do not call me if this is what you want to talk about. For everybody that's just joining, if you're joining on Instagram, we're talking about forgiveness and boundaries. Right now, we're on the topic of friends. We talked about relationships, family, and we also talked about forgiveness. So we're going to talk about coworkers next. Also, if you're on Instagram, my battery is dying. So join us on YouTube when this cuts off. um, so yeah, I would just be very clear. I would be very, very clear. And I think with friends, right, it's okay to um, not make it as blunt depending on the person and the friendship. But with some people, you just have to be like blunt and not worry about if it's coming across as mean or if it's coming across as rude or if they're going to be offended by it. Some people you just have to say, hey, look, this is that, this is what I'm not going to do anymore. With other people, you might want to approach it with, I really enjoy our friendship. I really enjoy talking to you, but like this is not helpful for my mental health. Like there's different ways to word it. I think you just have to figure out what works best for you and for your friendship. And I think also you have to consider, is this a friendship that you want to continue involving yourself in? Because that also changes how you approach the conversation of setting boundaries, if that makes sense. So like if it's somebody that you don't intend to continue moving forward with, you don't have to like try and coddle their feelings. I mean, you don't have to do it with people that you want to maintain a friendship with, but I think you get what I'm saying. Like, if it's someone that you're just very clear, I do not want to talk to this person anymore. It's like, you don't have to, be nice about it. You can just say it. And I've personally been practicing not being nice about my boundaries lately, like not explaining myself, not saying, oh, I really appreciate X, Y, and Z. No, just saying it, just being like, just rip the band-aid off, just snatch it off. And just wear whatever comes with it. I think as long as you are clear and you are, I think also making it about you is helpful. So instead of making it about them, like you're doing this and you're doing that, like just making it about you, like using I statements, like I feel like this. I'm feeling like I need, yes, practice. Shanice and Locks, what's your first name? I don't want to keep calling you Locks. But yes, practicing actually helps. Like role play with it yourself if you need to. I'm very, very transparent with you guys. For me, I am someone that has to like write stuff out to process it. So if I have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, I will literally write it out first. Like I'll write it out in my phone, how I'm gonna say it, how I'm gonna phrase it, and I'll read it over, and I'll kind of tweak it. I'm like, okay, does this sound too blunt? Does this sound too nice? Does this sound direct enough? Is it clear of what I'm asking for? With all the examples that I just gave you guys, I've done that with every single person where I've been like, or honestly, except that one friend, like we were just on the phone and I was like, look, I can't do this anymore, sis. So yeah, practice. It actually works. It may seem silly, but it works because it gets you comfortable with just using your voice. I think another way you can practice setting boundaries too is doing it with small stuff. So let's say you are in the grocery store, right? And let's say you're waiting online and we got to do the 6 feet apart. So now it's kind of difficult for people to tell sometimes if you're online because they may not see you. So let's say you're waiting online and somebody comes and they just like cuts in front of you, right? And they just like put their cart in line. And you could say, oh, actually, excuse me, I'm online, like this is the line. Or you could just, be passive and kind of just like let them do whatever. Maybe you genuinely don't care, but let's say like you do care, let's say you actually are like, no, I want to get out of this store and I don't think that this person should just get in front of me. Or and this is not necessarily to be like confrontational, but like sometimes setting a boundary does require a level of like confronting someone. You can confront someone without being disrespectful, without being aggressive. You can just say, excuse me, I'm actually online. And maybe that person's like, oh, I didn't see you there, but I only have a few things. Like, do you mind if I just go in front of you? You can look at that person and just say, no, like, actually, no, and I think practicing with small things like that can get you more comfortable in those bigger moments when it comes up with friends, when it comes up with family, when it comes up with people you're dating. Like Shani said, no is a complete sentence. Absolutely. It is a complete sentence. And sometimes, just practicing it with strangers can get you to a point where you feel more comfortable doing it with closer relationships. Because I honestly find that it's difficult for me to do with people that I have to interact with on a consistent basis. With strangers, it's not as difficult, but with people that I know, like coworkers or friends or family, it has been really difficult for me to set clear boundaries with people in that way. Gianna, Gina, I'm like about saying that right, Gianna. Or if I text and wanting time to talk about something that's bothering me, days later she would text me and finally respond. So yes, I do need to say no. Yeah, I think that sounds like okay. She said I got it right. I think that sounds like a conversation needs to be had. It can be had. I also find that for me with setting boundaries, it's easier to do when I'm not in the present moment of being like triggered by something. Like I'm just getting to the point where I can, like, in the midst of something happening, being like, actually, I don't want to talk about this, or actually, like, no, but it's still a practice for me. And I find that sometimes it's just easier for me to say, okay, I'm gonna make a mental note of that. I'm gonna calm down because sometimes when people overstep your boundaries that they don't know exist, it can be very triggering, right? You could be like, wow, this person is really doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like sometimes they don't even know that that's a boundary, right? So, like, taking a step back, sometimes pausing and just being like, okay, I'm gonna approach this when I have a level head, after I've written it out, after I've practiced it, after you've done whatever you need to do to feel comfortable with approaching it. And then you can approach it from kindness. You can approach it from a place where it's well thought out. You can approach it from a place where it's not emotional. I think that's really important, especially when it comes to this next group, which is coworkers. Setting boundaries with coworkers. I would love if you guys have stories about times that you had to set a boundary with a coworker or a boss. Please drop it in the comment section. Please, because I think that is an area that I think the topic of boundaries and forgiveness in general, there's no lesson on this in life. It just comes through experience. At least for me, I was never sat down into this is how you articulate your boundaries to someone. Like, that conversation didn't happen until I started therapy. My therapist taught me this. um, so yeah, like setting boundaries with coworkers and especially bosses, I feel like can be very intimidating because a lot of us have the mindset sometimes of like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to disrupt the dynamic between myself and my team. It's like there's so many reasons why things can happen at work with coworkers or with managers or with bosses, and you're just like, I'm gonna just let that go. I'm gonna just let that slide because you don't want to cause any friction with people that you spend the most time with. Oh, this is a good comment. Shanice says, setting boundaries at work, even if you get called angry, happened to me. Set boundaries at work, even if you get called angry, it happened to me. Wow, that's real. That's real. Sometimes it's like, again, back to what I said in the beginning, it's like sometimes when you are setting boundaries, you're going to be the villain in somebody's eyes. Like it's inevitable that somebody may not like it. And you just have to accept that like that comes with the territory sometimes. I do think that there's a way to, like I said before, approach situations where you have to address something, but you don't have to be confrontational. There is a difference. Like I don't want to make it seem like I'm promoting like just run up on everybody like this is my boundary, I'm this and that. But I think it is important that you have a level of being willing to address things when they don't feel right, when they don't feel good, when they are illegal, when they're not aligned. Like I know, like a lot of times, a big fear is just people don't want to lose their jobs. People don't want to lose their jobs. I don't know how closely you guys follow um, the Lindsays, Heather Lindsay and her husband Cornelius, who does they have a church and they have like workshops and stuff. And I actually attended their conference before. Like I used to be like one of those people that was really drawn to their ministry. And I don't want to get too into it because it is kind of a messy situation. But the reason I brought it up is because I was watching one of the videos from one of the guys that used to work for them, right? So they have like this whole scandal happening right now. And one of the guys that used to work for them, he was their administrative assistant. He talked about how, he saw a lot of shady activities happening, but he didn't speak up or he did speak up at the time, and it caused backlash. Like that resulted in him getting fired after that. And I was just like, but it's like that's something that a lot of people face, where it's like you may see things that are happening that are not right. You may experience things yourself that are not right. And it causes you to silence yourself, out of fear of losing your job. But I think setting boundaries with your coworkers, with your boss, with your manager is healthy, is possible. And there's a way to do it that does not have to be confrontational. So I can give you guys an example from a previous job where I'm actually super grateful for this experience because it taught me a lot about articulating boundaries at work. But I also want to mention, again, if you guys just joined on Instagram, battery is dying. So join on YouTube because this is going to end soon. But yeah, when it comes to work, something that was helpful for me was, again, preparing, right? Writing out the different instances, right? Being very clear about what was happening, what was going wrong, documenting things. And then if you work at a setting where you have a yearly review or a quarterly review, those are great opportunities to be very clear without coming across as angry or confrontational or sensitive. I think those are great opportunities to use that space to really be reflective on these are the things that are not working. These are the things that I would like to change, and then providing examples. This is how we can change them. So I think if you have a work setting where you have that type of environment where you can meet with your managers on a regular basis to have discussions about your performance and about their performance, because I think performance reviews are not just about the employee, but it's also about the employer and the managers too. So like use that as a time to, come with your receipts, come with, these are the things that are happening. These are the things that are not okay and not conducive to my work style. These are the ways that I suggest that we change them. And you can be very clear about that. And I know everyone's work situation is different, so everyone's boundaries and experiences are different. But I think just having that mindset is helpful. If you don't have a job where you can have a routine meeting with your manager, set one. At every company, no matter where you work, you should be able to say, if I want to have a conversation with my manager, I'm going to reach out to whoever I need to reach out to and say, hey, I would like to just have a quick meeting to talk about a few things, to go over a few things, So if it's not set up for you, don't think that that means, oh, well, I can't have a performance review, so I can't talk to my manager about this stuff. No, you can. And if you feel like you're not comfortable talking to your manager about certain things, every company should have an HR team or an HR person, and you can also talk to them as well. If it's things that are like sexual misconduct or something of that sort, like something that goes beyond like, okay, maybe this person, like when I worked in an office setting, something that would drive me crazy was when people would just walk over to my desk and just like ask me questions. They wouldn't send me a message first, like, hey, you got a quick minute? Like, can we chat? They just walk over and be like, hey, so I was thinking about, and I'm like, you don't see these headphones? Like, what are we doing? But like, so if you have situations that are beyond those types of things, or if it's harassment, or if it's like anything like that, I think it's also helpful to call in reinforcement, which is HR. Okay, so let me read some of the comments. Setting boundaries at work when you are the youngest one in the department. That's a good point. I notice when I'm the youngest one in my job, they treat me a little different, such as making sure I am doing the work correctly and speaking to me in a certain way. I experienced that recently, and it's so funny because I'm actually not the youngest person, but I think this person thought that I was younger than them. So they were making comments, like they were just speaking to me in a certain way. I'm not going to say what they said, but they were just speaking to me in a certain way that felt like terms of endearment. Like I think that's how they meant it, but it was actually really offensive for a lot of reasons. And I just was like, hey, I know you probably don't mean any harm by this, but please don't call me this anymore. Thank you. And it was just like as simple as that, because that's so true. When people perceive you as younger, or if you actually are younger, and like low key, I get it because I do look like I'm like fresh out of college to some extent, but like, baby girl, don't get it twisted. Like, don't get it twisted. And that happens all the time when people think that you are younger. I experience it in day-to-day life, like when I'm out and about in the world. If someone's like, they see me and they're like, or if I'm at a store or something and they're like, oh, here you go, honey. And I'm like, don't call me honey, like don't call me baby, don't call me honey, don't call me sweetie, don't call me any of those things, because I don't know you like that, number one. And number two, like you're using it in a way that implies that you're like this mature figure and I'm not, for some reason, because you never see other grown women calling other grown women honey and sweetie and baby unless they're close, they have that close relationship. But strangers, you don't see that. They do that to little kids. Oh, look at the little baby. Oh, sweetie, so adorable. It's like, you don't do that to another person in a professional setting if you don't have that relationship with them. So I think it's so important to, whether it's something big or something small, to nip stuff like that in the bud quickly. Because if you allow it, like if you give people an inch sometimes and you don't say anything, it's going to continue. This is kind of funny. It reminds me of the conversation of boundaries in a weird way. I guess it is kind of a boundary, but I think with people mispronouncing names. Now I know, like, I'm sure I probably slaughtered some of your names in the comment section. I'm sorry. But in professional settings, right, it could be kind of awkward where, let's say you're in a meeting, right? And I've had plenty of instances where I've been the only Black woman, right? I'm the only Black woman. I'm the only person with natural hair. I'm the only person that like kind of stands out, looks different. And then my name, oftentimes people say it wrong. So let's say I'm in a meeting and, the person that's speaking, they're like, oh yeah, Fatima, or they're like, how else do people pronounce it? A lot of times it's Fatima, or it's depending on their cultural background, they may say like Fatima, like if you're from like Latin, they'll say like Fatima, or just different things, right? And it's like sometimes, depending on the relationship I have with the person, also depending on the mood that I'm in, I'm like, oh, like, it's okay, right? Because sometimes I understand that it's a cultural thing. Like if someone, like for example, my old landlord, they're from Dominican Republic. And so when she sees my name, she sees Fatima. She's like, oh, Fatima, like her and her husband, that's how they pronounce my name. So I'm not like, oh, actually, it's Fatima, like making this like big deal out of it. But in other situations, like if I'm in a professional meeting and, it's like the whole team is there and this person is slaughtering my name, it can be uncomfortable. It can be really uncomfortable to be like, actually, it's Fatima, like I think that's something that it's like one of the smaller examples. It's one of the smaller examples, but it makes me really uncomfortable when it happens in professional settings. I'm like, so do I tell them now or later that that's not how you pronounce my name? Like, when do I let them know that that's actually not how you say it? But yeah, when it's like a cultural thing, I tend to just let people slide with it. But when it's like an American person, when it's an American person, I'm like, yeah, no. But if it's like someone's old abuela, it's like, abuela, you can call me Fatima. Like, I don't care. Tressa says, people say my name wrong all the time, but I don't mind. I'm probably saying it wrong. Tressa? Is it Tressa? Teresa? But yeah, so that's my thoughts about coworkers. And that was actually the last point that I wanted to touch on. Wow, I'm surprised my phone didn't die. It's probably going to die any minute though. But that was the last point I wanted to touch on. So let me know if you guys have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, and I will answer those. Also, I want to mention again for those who might have joined later. Okay, I'm saying it right. For those who join later in the stream, that I'm hosting a conversation tomorrow with Kat from Girl Power LA, and we're going to be discussing how to set healthy relationship goals. So setting boundaries in relationships. How do you do that before you start dating? I think it's important before you start dating, also when you're dating, but definitely like before you start dating, you should have some clear guidelines, of what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, how you want to be treated, how you're not going to be treated. So we're going to be talking about all that. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be like girl time. We're doing it at 6 p.m. PST via Zoom. So I'll be able to see you guys if you want to join. There's only 2 seats left. So sign up now. Link is in my bio on Instagram. And I posted it in the group chat on YouTube. So yeah, that's it. I don't see any questions or anything coming in, so I'm going to assume that you guys don't have any. Thank you so much for tuning into this conversation. I hope that you guys are enjoying these. If you know someone that may benefit from this conversation about forgiveness and boundaries, please, please, please share the link with a friend. Make sure you are subscribed also, because sometimes I just go on randomly and I don't announce it. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys are doing well. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the convo. I enjoyed the convo too. I love doing these conversations with you guys. Short Tay, I think. I am actually ending the live stream right now. So if you missed it, you can watch it over on my YouTube channel. It'll be up there. But thank you guys for joining, for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. And hopefully I'll see some of you guys on Saturday. Bye.